All right, today we're going to talk about some very important information, not as exciting as some of the other content that we've been putting out, but it is no less important. This is going to be all about rental agreements. What are the basic elements that you need to have in a rental agreement? This is something that we've done for the past 15, 20 years, and so we're going to give you our insights into this. But before we do, I want to ask you to do something that doesn't cost you anything, and that is just to click the subscribe button below. Now, we are going to put a lot of time and energy and money into producing quality videos for you. We just ask that you just click the subscribe button. It doesn't take you very long at all, and we'll continue to spend money and resources to do this for you so that your rental journey can be a successful one. Now for this video, I've got my little cheat sheet here. I've just got a list of some of the most basic and important elements that you need to include in your lease. And before I go any further, I do want to tell you that you should probably make sure that an attorney reviews a lease for you. I know that a lot of people will ask AI to produce a lease, or they'll go and buy a cheap one online. And I'm not saying those things are horrible, but it's important that you have one. I would have a state-specific one, and I would have an attorney review it. The crazy thing is, just probably 6 months ago, my niece was leasing her whole basement out to a resident, and I asked her what her lease looked like, and she didn't even have a lease. So don't be my niece. Make sure you have a lease before somebody moves in, because you don't want to go through the trouble of trying to get somebody out of your property that doesn't have a lease. So let's get into the basic elements of your rental agreement. Now, obviously, you're going to have their name, you're going to have their address, the address of the property, and the agreement is between the resident that you're signing this with and yourself, or your entity, your LLC, your business, however you're leasing this property. It doesn't really matter. Obviously, the next thing we're going to talk about is the rental term. How long is this for? Some people like to do it for 12 months. Some people want to lock somebody in for 24 months. I would say most residents are comfortable signing a 12-month lease. Some may be looking for a shorter period of time. That's going to be completely up to you. Most residents are looking, though, for an unfurnished house and a 12-month lease. Next you want in the lease, obviously, is how much they're going to be charged per month. Make that very, very clear. For the next 12 months, they're going to be charged this much. Then you want to talk about in the lease how much the security deposit is. And that security deposit, we recommend, be equal to 1 month's rent. Something else you want to have is a late fee policy. For us, rent is due on the 1st and late after the 3rd. So they have really 3 days to pay rent. Anything after that, we're going to charge a late fee. Now you get to decide what that is, but just make it very clear on the contract, on the lease agreement, so that they understand what the penalty is for paying on the 5th or the 6th or the 7th of the month. You also want to have the names of the residents on this lease agreement, and you want to make sure that you're not missing anybody who's 18 and above who's going to be living in that property. As a matter of fact, you want to run them through the rental verification, your screening process, just like you do the main person. What you want to avoid is somebody saying, hey, I'm leasing this property, and then my 3 oldest brothers and sisters are going to live with me, and that's not going to fly. You want anybody who's going to be living in the property, 18 and above, to go through the application process, and you want their names on the lease, because they're all signing this agreement and saying, we agree to pay this money. Next, you want renewal terms. You want to go ahead and outline what the terms are for when the lease is about to renew. They need to give probably around 30 days notice if they plan to move out of the property and not renew. That gives you 30 days to go ahead and understand what needs to be done. Maybe you can even go do an inspection. You want to get ahead of the process to get the property rented again. You want to make sure that you're doing the walk and you're dealing with the security deposit for the past resident as quickly as possible, but just have those renewal terms on the lease. You also want to let them know that all utilities are going to be their responsibility. And then next, talk about maintenance. How are you going to handle maintenance? Because as the landlord, you're going to be responsible for maintenance. However, if there is resident-related damage, you should outline how you're going to deal with that. This means if you go out to fix, if you send a plumber out to the property because the toilet is clogged up, and the plumber goes in there and finds kids' toys that have been shoved down the toilet, you need to define exactly how you're going to handle that. Are you going to charge the resident, or are you going to bear the burden of that cost? In our lease agreement, we're going to charge the resident for resident-related damage, but everything else is going to be the responsibility of the landlord. We also think it's good to have just a basic list of the resident's responsibilities, things like keeping the yard maintained, keeping the property clean. You probably want to have a list of things that you think are just very important for them to understand. This is how you should be treating the house. It's more of like their list of obligations. In our lease agreement a long time ago, we used to have our top 10 list, and those were essentially their basic duties that the resident was agreeing to when they signed this contract. Next, you want to talk about insurance. Are you going to require them to have renter's insurance? If so, put that in the lease agreement. And then you're also going to talk about in the lease agreement renter's access to the property. If you need to get into the property, what is going to be the criteria for doing that? Do you give them 24 hours notice, 48 hours notice? Can you go in if they're not there? That needs to be all outlined in the lease agreement just so that everybody is clear. And just a helpful hint, we like to give people as much time as possible, let them know that, hey, we're going to be coming in the house on this date to do an inspection. We'd love for them to be there. We want them to be in the home while we're walking through it. That way, if we have any questions, we can talk to them about it. But you just want to outline that in the agreement. I've already mentioned security deposit, but you also want to outline how the security deposit is going to be handled after they moved out. This is going to be really state specific. Do you need to get the security deposit back to them in 30 days, 60 days? Whatever the law says, you need to do that, but outline that in the agreement. Next, you need to talk about what happens if they fail to pay rent. This is something that everyone wants to avoid, the resident included, but it should be outlined in the agreement. Next, it's going to be rate adjustment. So how are you going to handle adjusting rent after a year is up? Is there going to be room for an increase? And this is something that you're going to typically give them probably 45 to 60 days notice, just letting them know, hey, we're going to raise rent. You want to do it before the 30-day notice period. That way it gives the resident time to decide, do I want to stay here or do I want to go find another place? And then lastly, what I would say, it all depends on if you're going to allow pets. What is your pet policy? Are you going to have a pet fee, a pet deposit? Are you going to have pet rent? We've seen it all three different ways. At Evernest, we charge a pet fee. That means we collect an upfront fee. It's not a security deposit, so they're not going to get it back. It's just a fee for having the pet in the home, because we know that with a pet is going to come some type of damage. We don't know how much. It's really difficult to identify it unless it's very obvious. But this kind of all goes into, are you going to even allow pets or not? We would encourage you to allow pets because 66% of households in America have pets. And that means that you would shrink your pool of potential residents way down if you weren't going to allow pets. But outline in the agreement how you're going to deal with that. That is it. Those are the basics of what you need to have in your lease agreement. I hope those kind of gave you some insight into what we look for. If we can ever help you, don't hesitate to reach out, sales@evernest.co, and somebody on our team will get with you, talk to you about your rental property, and see if we can help you rent this house and take care of your resident.